Hello everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, Choyen Machu Ba Dui. I hope everyone enjoys the ghost stories today. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to support us. Today, we continue with the ghost stories sent by our viewers. If anyone has a ghost story they want to share, you can send it via Gmail or through the Zalo phone number shown on the screen. The first ghost story today is about an evil spirit that was seen in the house of a former spiritual healer. This story takes place in 2009 when your family bought an old house in Ben Tre. The house once belonged to a very skilled spiritual healer. After the healer passed away, the house was sold to new owners. And you were the third owner of the house. Living in a house that once belonged to a spiritual healer meant that the experiences would be different from a regular house. At first, when your family moved in, only you and your mother were at home. One day, while you were lying down to sleep, you clearly saw two spirits enter your house. One spirit was wearing golden armor, and the other wore silver armor, resembling warriors from medieval times. You described how they walked into the house, leading a dog with them. But this wasn't just any dog, it had a demonic face. With red, glowing eyes, and instead of walking on the ground, it floated, flying over your house's fence while the night outside was pitch black. You were so terrified that you woke up abruptly. After a few minutes, when you fell back asleep, you saw the same vision again. The spirits and the dog returned. This time, you were wide awake and didn't dare to sleep anymore. You stayed up all night, too afraid to close your eyes. On the third day, while you were asleep, the spirits came back again with the same dog. This time, the dog charged at you and attacked you violently. You grabbed a piece of wood to defend yourself. But as you prepared to strike the dog, you felt the spirits pulling you, trying to drag you away. In that struggle, your grandfather suddenly appeared, helping you and causing the spirits to fall down, making a loud noise. That's when you woke up in a panic. And everything seemed so strange. You couldn't understand why the same thing happened to you for 3 consecutive nights. After telling your mother about it, you found out that the spirits might be the lingering spirits of the healer, who had no one to guide them since their master passed away. They had wandered around without purpose, still lost. After your mother performed a ritual and prayed, you never saw the spirits again. Later, you went to Saigon to work for a half-brother. You rented a room, and for the first few months, everything seemed fine. But one night, after returning from overtime work, you went to sleep and again saw 2 white shadows walking across your bed. You could clearly feel the bed sinking, as if someone had just jumped on it. You were terrified, and when you checked the other room, you saw no one. You told your brother about it, but he didn't believe you, thinking you were just overreacting or haunted by your past experiences. So, you decided to move to a new place. When you rented a new room, you noticed that every night, your child would cry loudly around 4 a.m. You took the child outside to calm them down, but it didn't help. So, you decided to send your child to your parents' house. However, one night, after coming home from work, you saw a strange child standing at the corner of your room. The child was sitting down, drinking water, which terrified you. You rushed out of the room and went to your sister's room to sleep. But she said her child also looked at the same corner and cried every night. The next day, you went to buy offerings and performed a ritual in the room. That night, when you went to sleep, you felt the same child sitting on your chest, preventing you from moving. You recited prayers, and eventually, the child released you. The next day, you called your father to ask for help, and he took you to a temple to get talismans to place in the room. From then on, the room became warmer, and you no longer felt the presence of spirits. At work, you worked with a transgender colleague who had the ability to communicate with spirits. She often helped people with spiritual matters, and you once asked her to check if you had any spiritual problems. She accurately described the spirits that had been following you and even mentioned that the owner of your rental house was a Catholic and didn't believe in spirits, which explained why there was no spiritual protection there. The next day, after a few drinks with colleagues, you found yourself more susceptible to seeing spirits. As you were washing dishes, you saw an old woman and another figure. You were terrified, unsure of what to do. The woman waited in the room for about 15 minutes. However, the staff hadn't finished with her eyebrow shaping yet. Suddenly, she got up and ran out of the room, screaming loudly and looking completely pale. as if she had seen something terrifying. When people asked her what happened, she wouldn't answer. Everyone saw her running out of the room and across the store to the front door, looking scared as if she had seen something. No one could get an answer from her. At that time, your uncle was also at the salon but didn't know what was happening. Only the longtime staff knew the cause of the incident. Your uncle didn't ask anyone because they didn't give any answers. So he didn't know the origin of the room's strange atmosphere. He thought maybe there was a mouse or a cockroach in the room that the woman was afraid of. Americans are often scared of rodents. So he thought that might be the reason. Your uncle went into the room to check, looking for any mice or insects. But after checking carefully, he found no sign of rodents or insects in the room. Stepping out of the room, he was still puzzled and thought it was strange. He couldn't understand why the woman had run out in such a hurry. Then, everything seemed to calm down. And after that, the woman left. A week later, another incident occurred. This time, a Vietnamese customer came into the shop for a facial massage. The woman, along with a little girl, had faces that looked like they were wearing old-fashioned clothing, similar to those traditional cheongsams. Coincidentally, the next morning, when you went to work, you heard your colleague OK telling a story about how she saw the spirit of an old woman, about 80 years old, and a little girl, about 12 years old, at exactly noon one day. A while later, the father of your boss passed away at your workplace. You often called your boss's mother, you, a term of respect. So you referred to your boss's father as grandfather. But until then, you had never seen your grandfather. On the day of the funeral, you went and sat with your colleagues and drank until 2 or 3 a.m. while sitting there drinking. You looked up and saw the figure of an old man on the upper floor. When you saw him, you immediately knew it was a ghost. You told your colleagues that you had just seen your grandfather. And at that moment, your boss scolded you, saying you were crazy, but you clearly remembered the figure of that old man, along with the outfit he was wearing. You told your boss, I saw him clearly. He was wearing shorts made of some kind of fabric. And I could even see a design on his shorts. Something like a person holding a ball. The shorts were like those old-fashioned ones that older men used to wear. His shirt was a striped t-shirt. And his hair was styled like a crew cut, but a bit longer. He was skinny, not fat. I'm not sure if I saw the spirit of my grandfather or not. At that time, you only knew your boss and didn't know much about their father. When you shared this story, everyone believed you. They said it was true. Before he passed, your grandfather wore the same outfit, had the same hairstyle, and his figure was just like you described. But your boss still doubted whether the spirit of your grandfather had already returned, or if it was still at the hospital. You said you saw his face, which looked very sad and downcast. A month later, your grandmother passed away as well. You thought to yourself, perhaps it was because your grandfather was so sad, wanting to take your grandmother with him. This is the end of the first story. The second story happened at a shoe company in Binh Duong. It occurred in 2019. After you had just graduated from high school, you started working at a shoe manufacturing company. The working hours were from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. It took a lot of time and effort. And honestly, it was very exhausting. During that time, the young man always felt pain and heaviness in his shoulders and neck, as if 2 heavy stones were placed on them. He felt as if his mentor, the one helping him, was constantly watching to see if he could break the curse. The mentor continued to apply rituals to help the young man. Every night, around 11 p.m., he would sit and perform rituals until 2 a.m. It was very tiring. And after breaking one curse, another would strike him even harder. He had to balance working while performing these rituals to protect himself, which drained him even more. Sometimes, he barely got any sleep. After successfully breaking the second curse, the third one came even stronger. And each time, it was more intense than before. He had to perform rituals just to protect himself while working. Eventually, his mentor taught him additional methods for self-defense. So now the curses were much harder to penetrate. By the end of the year, the young man had mostly managed to get rid of the curses himself. But shortly after the Lunar New Year, the woman, Nu, sent an even more powerful curse to him. This curse was stronger than anything he had faced before, and the effects were immediate. During the night, he could feel the curse strengthening. However, by now, he had learned enough techniques to protect himself. Even so, the battle was not over. The struggle between the two sides intensified. and he ended up losing the use of half of his body. Though he did not die, he described it as if a sharp iron rod had pierced through his back, causing immense pain. Even though he had spiritual protection, he still struggled against the curse. He explained that the battle between the forces of black magic involved the use of spirit armies, Mbin, and the side with the stronger spirit army would overpower the weaker one, gradually causing the victim to weaken and eventually die. Desperate, the young man kept calling his mentor for help, as the curse was much stronger this time. His mentor fought back with all his might, using all of his spiritual resources to combat the curses. Eventually, the mentor managed to break the curse. However, the attack had taken a toll on both the mentor and his spirit army. When a practitioner of black magic is defeated, all their spiritual forces are drained, leaving them powerless and vulnerable. The young man then realized that despite the woman and her sorcerer losing the battle, they were still affected. The woman's health deteriorated, and her face turned pale. Even though she had lost, the cost of using black magic on others was great. As for the young man, he had learned more about these spiritual practices and could now differentiate between regular pain and pain caused by curses. It was a difficult battle, but he had become stronger and more resilient. After that, the woman, New, continued to seek out other sorcerers to target him. Recently, she had hired another practitioner to curse him again, but by then, he had become more powerful. The curse was still potent, but it wasn't as effective as before. He once again sought his mentor's help to break the curse. When the mentor finished the ritual, the young man was informed that both the woman and her sorcerer had been struck by their own magic, with the curses being reflected back onto them. The woman, New, no longer dared to approach the young man. After that incident, she started avoiding him and his friends, not daring to confront him anymore. This was when the young man realized how much stronger he had become through his spiritual training. He had learned to protect himself, and the curses no longer had the same effect on him as they once did. This is a ghost story that did not happen in Vietnam, but rather in the United States. Many people say that the United States is a civilized country. So how could there be ghost stories there? But after hearing this story, think about it. Can a civilized country like the US have spirits lingering around? Today's story is about the spirit of a man who passed away early, and it takes place in a nail salon. The story is told by a man who lives and works in the US. He went back to Vietnam this past New Year to visit his family. And while he was there, he shared a ghost story from the nail salon where he works in the US. He said that his uncle, who is still quite young and was born in 1990, had encountered this ghost story for the first time after he moved to the US. This is a real story. His uncle moved to the US in 2015 and currently works at a nail salon in California. Back then, it was difficult to find a job in Vietnam, so he knew a person whose family owned a large nail salon in the US, and that's how he decided to move to America to work in the nail industry. The first day he stepped into the nail salon, he noticed something unusual. The salon was very busy, with a lot of customers. There were many rooms, nail rooms, massage rooms for clients, and even a break room for employees. But as he walked around these rooms, he noticed something strange. Every room seemed to have protective charms or amulets hanging everywhere. Seeing so many amulets, he felt a little uneasy. The mentor also sent a few spirits, who were disciples of the master, to protect the young man. They would accompany him to guard him from any harm. Some might wonder why, after breaking the curses, the young man didn't use his own magic to deal with New, especially since he now had the knowledge. However, in Buddhist teachings, there is a rule that prohibits harming others, and anyone who follows the righteous path will never be allowed to cause harm to another, no matter the situation. Ultimately, those who harm others with black magic will suffer tragic consequences themselves. Regarding how the young man broke the curse, he asked for permission not to share the details, as it is a sacred and confidential part of the teachings. He also advised others that if they felt they were being harmed by someone's curses or magic, they could chant specific prayers and meditate. By chanting the names of Buddhas and performing rituals before a statue or image of Buddha, they could seek help to break the curse. The young man mentioned that he would share more stories from his journey of learning the magical practices if he had time. And so, this was the end of the first story. which was a chilling tale of how someone was cursed due to money not being repaid. Now, let's move on to another story, which is also quite terrifying. It's about a group of young travelers who went on a trip to Thailand. This story happened several years ago, but the young man had gathered it and decided to share it. Before telling the story, he mentioned that this, like all the other stories, might be unsettling to some, especially for those who enjoyed traveling to Thailand. The story is about a group of 5 friends who went to Pattaya, Thailand. While traveling on a bus, the oldest member of the group heard someone suggesting they visit a large temple to obtain lucky charms, known as talismans. At first, everyone thought it was just a simple visit to the temple to ask for good luck. But 2 members of the group agreed to go, including the older man and a friend of the young man. The young man, however, remembered he already had a talisman from a temple in Vietnam, and thought it was unnecessary to get another one. He didn't want to join them and stayed behind. The older man, along with the other friend, went to the temple, where they obtained their talismans. That night, the young man had a strange dream where he saw the oldest man from the group. In the dream, the man was surrounded by people, and on his back, there were many faces imprinted, which was disturbing. The young man woke up suddenly, feeling uneasy. When he shared the dream with the group the next morning, some believed him, while others were skeptical. Still, the group agreed that the older man should burn the talisman, as they didn't think it would be effective. The man agreed and burned it. Afterward, the trip seemed to go back to normal, and nothing unusual happened until they returned home. However, when they got back, the young man received a call from a doctor, informing him that the oldest man from the group had been hospitalized due to severe seizures. The doctor also mentioned that, in addition to treating his internal organs, they had to address his psychological issues, as the man had swallowed many nails, which was highly unusual. The doctor showed the family an X-ray image, which revealed that some nails had lodged in the man's esophagus and lungs, with others remaining in his stomach. The whole situation was strange and terrifying. When the friends visited the hospital to check on him, they asked why he had done such a bizarre thing. The man explained that just a few days ago, he had gone to the temple and gotten a talisman. But after that, things started to feel very strange, as if something was controlling him. He couldn't understand why he had done such a thing. The staff had placed the Vietnamese customer in the same room where the American woman had screamed the previous week. She lay down to wait while the staff prepared to come in. However, before the staff could enter, the woman suddenly ran out of the room, scared out of her mind. Her expression was full of fear, and she ran quickly to the front counter. The manager asked her what had happened, and she said, "While I was lying there, a man about 3 meters tall came into the room. He lifted my skirt and touched my inner thigh. I was shocked, sat up, and looked around, but I saw no one. Then I noticed that he had disappeared into the corner of the room." The woman explained that when she opened her eyes, she saw the man's face clearly. He was very large and terrifying. His face was dark and sinister, with a lot of hair on it. She was terrified and couldn't believe what had happened. The staff, including the manager, were very upset when they heard the woman's story. They rushed into the room to check, but there was no one there. The only thing they felt was a cold, eerie chill in the room, like the air was chilled by ice. Your uncle went into the room as well, and he also felt very uncomfortable. It was so cold and strange that he immediately put on his fur hat. He and the salon owner went outside to talk. Your uncle asked, "Is there something wrong with this house? Why are customers having these strange experiences in the room?" At that point, the owner explained that the building had once been a restaurant. Many years ago, there had been a conflict between the restaurant owner and a gang. One day, the gang members came and killed the owner and his son. After their deaths, the building had passed through the hands of many owners, with no one staying long. The salon owner mentioned that the previous owners only lasted a month or so before leaving mysteriously, with no one ever knowing why. However, since the current owner opened the nail salon, business had been booming, and the salon was very successful. The owner joked that maybe the spirits were helping their business succeed, as they were lucky compared to previous owners. He also mentioned that when his family rented the building, the previous owners seemed desperate to move out quickly and didn't want to stay in the house any longer. Again, this story takes place in the US. His uncle was very curious, so he asked his friend, The nephew of the salon owner, we'll call him Vin. About the amulets, his uncle asked. Why are there amulets everywhere in the salon? Every room has them. Vin responded. Oh, it's nothing. There are many nail salons around here. And people see that ours is doing well. So they try to sabotage it. That's why we have to put up these amulets for protection. To keep the salon peaceful and ensure business runs smoothly. His uncle thought this was normal and didn't think much of it because he believed that in the US, where people are very civilized, spiritual things like that were rare. He felt that if there were any spiritual happenings, they would be very uncommon. Not like in Vietnam. He didn't experience anything unusual and was able to sleep well. So he didn't worry about it. Everything seemed fine until one day when a customer, a Russian-American woman, came into the salon. She wanted to get her eyebrows done. After she had her eyebrows shaved, something happened. The staff was busy at that time. So they arranged for her to wait in the waiting room until someone was free to do her eyebrows. After the staff finished with her facial treatment, she stayed in the waiting room. The employees were aware of the situation. But the new staff, like your uncle, didn't know what was going on. So he wasn't aware of the haunting. Although he was scared, he had been working at the nail salon for a few years. And his life had become quite stable. So, when he returned home to visit, he shared the story with you. That was the end of the first story. The ghost story about a perverted spirit haunting a nail salon in America. The next story is about a time when a family was cursed using a magical spell involving playing cards. You might find this story a bit strange, but listen to it and see how eerie the curse really was. This story is completely true and happened at your aunt's house about 30 years ago. Back then, your aunt and uncle had just gotten married and were about 18 years old. The newlyweds worked various jobs, including fishing and herding cattle. They worked hard, and in the evenings, your uncle would go fishing and sell the fish and frogs at the market in the morning. Your aunt said that at that time, there were many fish and shrimp, so they caught a lot. After some time, they managed to save enough money to build a house and buy more land. However, after they built the house, something strange started happening. Your uncle began to change. It was as if he had become mentally unstable. He would sit around all day doing nothing, speaking nonsense. Your aunt was very worried, so she often went to her parents' house for advice. Each time she visited, she told her mother about her husband's strange behavior, and her mother became upset. She took your aunt back home to ask your uncle what was going on. When asked, your uncle said that at night, he saw a figure walking on a firecracker stove, and sometimes he saw a naked person floating outside the window. Your grandmother thought he might have gone mad, so they took him to a mental hospital for a month. After the month passed, the doctors said he wasn't schizophrenic, just mentally weak. But when he returned home, his behavior became even worse. He would beat your aunt every day, leaving her head covered in blood. At night, he wouldn't sleep but instead sit outside next to a water jar, talking to it and laughing as if speaking to a real person. At this point, your aunt decided to consult a spiritual healer. The healer told her that her house had been cursed, and he gave her talismans to place around the house. After she followed the healer's instructions, your uncle stopped speaking nonsense and seemed to recover, which relieved your aunt. However, money was scarce in the family due to the expenses of treating your uncle. When things started to return to normal, your aunt's youngest child, under 1 year old, began having seizures. Your aunt had to take the child to the hospital multiple times, and she became exhausted. She looked so tired that her eyes were dark and sunken. And even after 30 years, they remained that way. Several years later, your aunt's middle child was diagnosed with a mental illness as well. During this time, her eldest child, who was healthy, was sent to live with her grandmother. He is now fine and has a family of his own. Eventually, your aunt sought out another healer, this time in Haojiang, who revealed that the curse had been placed by someone from within her own family. Not a stranger. The person who cursed them used the figures on playing cards because they were jealous of the family's success. This curse caused the family to suffer, losing their wealth and having children fall ill. The healer explained that the curse had been on the family for a long time, and there was no way to break it. The only solution was to move away from the land where the house was built. The healer also gave your aunt's middle child a talisman to wear. And after some time, his condition improved. However, it wasn't permanent. He would sometimes return to normal. but he would often slip back into his old state of illness. This story is truly eerie. And even now, your aunt's family still feels the lingering effects of the curse. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, Choyen Machu Ba Dui. Before we listen to the ghost stories, don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to support us. Today, we will continue with the ghost stories from all of you, our viewers. For those who have ghost stories to share, you can send them via email or the Zalo phone number displayed on the screen. Before we begin today's story, I want to tell you something. From now until around August, I might be quite busy because I have to work and also tell ghost stories. Due to the heavy workload, the frequency of the ghost stories might be a bit slower than usual. So, if there's a delay with the stories, don't be upset. I will still ensure that I upload clips regularly for everyone. In general, I'm quite excited because starting from now, when I get home from work, I'll go straight to my room to tell ghost stories. There's no time for rest. After telling the stories, I'll take care of my personal work. But no matter what, I hope to continue receiving your love just like I have always done. I still have many ghost stories waiting to be shared, and I really hope to meet all of you soon on the upcoming flights with Bamboo Airways. But for now, let's not delay any further and begin today's story. The previous owners were in such a rush to sell, and the price was quite low, so they decided to buy the house. At first, the owner didn't feel anything unusual while staying at the nail salon. However, one day, while he was taking a nap in the shop, he had the strange sensation of being lifted off the ground, as if he were floating in the air. Imagine lying on the bed, but feeling as though you're several meters above it, suspended in midair. It felt as if he were lying on a cloud. When he opened his eyes, it felt like he had just woken up from a dream. Within about 12 seconds, he suddenly fell to the ground with a thud. He woke up, and his body felt like it was being torn apart in pain. From that moment on, he never dared to sleep in the shop again and only stayed at home, leaving the management to handle the nail salon. After that event, the husband and wife of the salon owner rarely came to the shop. They left the management in charge. But sometimes, when they checked the cameras at home, they saw objects in the salon moving by themselves, even though no one was there and there was no wind. Have you ever seen videos online where tables, chairs, and other objects suddenly move by themselves? It was just like that in the shop. The objects moved on their own, and when they checked the camera footage from the staff's break room, they saw a shadowy figure walking around. The figure was very tall, about 3 meters high. This was the same room where the American woman had been haunted. But that wasn't all. The cameras outside the salon also caught sight of another shadowy figure. This figure would appear every night in front of the door, as if it was guarding the entrance and preventing anyone from entering. The couple was very scared, but since their business was doing so well, they decided to quietly offer prayers and sacrifices without doing anything drastic, leaving things as they were without selling the house. An even creepier incident occurred. The female staff working in the massage area of the shop would often experience terrifying moments. Whenever they went to the bathroom, the lights would turn off. Imagine going to the bathroom and suddenly the lights go out. Terrifying, right? But that wasn't all. When the lights went off, the women could feel someone sitting next to the toilet, breathing heavily. It was completely silent, except for the breathing sound. They also heard a voice speaking in a language that wasn't English, possibly Spanish, muttering something incomprehensible. Due to these continuous terrifying experiences, the female staff became very frightened. As a result, the nail salon had to constantly hire new staff. Interestingly, male employees were never haunted, only the female ones. Despite everything, the staff never spoke up about it. They just accepted the strange occurrences in the shop. The first story today is about a young man who became a victim of a curse just because he lent money to someone. This person kept asking for the money back but never paid it. So they used black magic on him. After hearing this story, everyone should be careful when lending money to others. Make sure you lend money only to those who are trustworthy. Now, let's begin the story. The young man says he has been living and working abroad for 2 years, but doesn't specify which country. After moving abroad, he met a girl from central Vietnam, and she lived with her older sister, who was from the north. Everything seemed fine until the young man and his girlfriend decided to move out and live together. However, Her family disagreed and kept blocking their plan. He thought that the reason was because the older sister was influencing his girlfriend and didn't like him, which is why the family wouldn't let them live together. As a result, he had an argument with the older sister, and the girlfriend ended up not moving out with him. Eventually, the two of them broke up. After the breakup, the young man asked the older sister for the money she had borrowed from him some time ago. Let's call her Sister New. Despite his repeated requests, she refused to pay him back. So one day, on the first of the month, he decided to demand the money again. He knew she wouldn't repay it, especially since he and her sister had broken up. Despite this, he kept asking, and they ended up arguing. From that day on, the young man started feeling that there were many spirits around him. Every time he went to his room to sleep, he felt like there were many people around him. He didn't know why, but one day, something led him to sit in a high chair. And as he was dozing off, he felt some force strike his head repeatedly. He couldn't resist, and no matter how much he yelled, no one could hear him. Since he practiced Buddhism, he started reciting Buddhist chants. And after a while, he woke up. He immediately called a monk in Vietnam, who was also a spiritual healer. The monk told him that Sister New had placed a curse on him. Fortunately, because he had recited the chants, he was protected to some extent. After that, he avoided her completely. Around the end of last year, Sister New began borrowing money from everyone in the company, accumulating up to around 200 million Vietnamese dongs. Since the young man had already been tricked once, he warned everyone in the company, telling them not to lend money to her. He even told people she was a fraud. But no one understood how she managed to get money from people. Later, he found out that she was using black magic to borrow money. She was able to charm even the stingiest person in the company with just a few words, making them willingly lend her money. When the young man asked the monk about it, he learned that she was using a spirit army, Mbin, to borrow money. This meant that every time the young man tried to take any action or talk to anyone about her, she already knew. After borrowing money, she didn't repay, and when people asked her for it, she would make them believe she was a fraud. The young man then realized that he had been the one to expose her in the company. And that's when she decided to target him again, this time with a more powerful curse. After the first curse, the young man had learned some spiritual practices from the monk to protect himself. This time, he recognized the signs of being cursed right away. As he had learned some techniques, he asked the monk for permission to handle it himself. But he was busy with work and didn't have much time to focus on spiritual practices. Your uncle's condition continued to worsen, so your aunt decided to take him to the mental hospital in Bien Hoa, Dong Nai. The doctors treated him, and after a while, he seemed fine again. But then, his mental state deteriorated, and he became irrational once more. Meanwhile, your aunt's youngest child, who had epilepsy, continued to suffer. Unfortunately, the child passed away when he was about 10 years old. His body shrank until he was just skin and bones. Although his passing ended his suffering, it was still a very difficult time for your aunt, who had cared for him for almost a decade. After that, your aunt and uncle decided to move to a new house, far away from the place where they had suffered. They relocated to a house near your grandmother's home. But soon after moving, your uncle's brother-in-law suddenly began showing signs of mental illness. Just like your aunt's middle child had, he would talk nonsensically and climb onto the roof at night, screaming and fighting with his wife and children. They took him to the mental hospital, but the doctors found nothing physically wrong with him. At this point, your aunt realized who had caused all of their family's suffering, her brother-in-law, who had cursed them. Once they realized who had harmed them, your aunt and uncle's lives started to improve. After they moved, your uncle returned to normal and no longer exhibited the erratic behavior he had before. Their eldest son grew up healthy and strong, and is now married with children. Your aunt, though not rich like others, is now living a more peaceful life and no longer suffers the hardships she once did. Now, let me tell you a shorter story from your uncle's past. He and another man from the village went fishing one day, and while digging, they accidentally uncovered 3 human skulls. Your uncle, being a spiritual person, believed in supernatural things. The other man, however, thought the skulls were just old coconut shells. Your uncle wrapped the skulls in palm leaves and made a small offering for them. Later, the other man began experiencing strange symptoms. His hands would shake uncontrollably, and his head would jerk in a strange way. Eventually, he passed away, and people around him believed it was the spirits of the skulls that had haunted him. The grave where the skulls were found is still there, though old and neglected. Every year, your family visits the grave to clean it. Sometimes, when they go there, they see strange lights near the grave, and people have even reported seeing 2 large frogs by the grave. Whenever someone tries to approach them, the frogs disappear, as if they were never there. This story serves as a reminder not to mess with the spirits of the dead. And that's where today's story ends. Before we finish, don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to help me out. If you enjoyed the story, leave a comment below so everyone else can read it too. Now, let's wait for the next story.